The cantina on Nexus Prime was loud with alien voices and the sound of glasses hitting tables. In the darkest corner, a creature with 4 arms sat alone. His name was Vexstar, and he was a Zolonian veteran. His hard-shell body was covered in scars from old battles. His big compound eyes watched everyone who walked by. This was a habit he could never break from his days as a soldier. A young reporter walked up to his table. She worked for the Galactic News Network. Her recording device blinked with a soft red light. "Commander Vexstar?" she asked in a quiet voice. "I am writing a story about the soldiers who died in the Human Coalition War. Will you talk to me?" Vexstar made a clicking sound with his mouth parts. Could have been a laugh, or maybe he was angry. About humans. "You want to know about humans when they fight?" He drank everything in his glass and raised his hand to order another drink. "I was in charge of 200 ships. We thought we would beat their simple species in just a few weeks." The reporter moved closer to his table. What happened instead? Happened. Vexstar's voice became very quiet. "I learned why the whole universe should be afraid of them. I learned why every military school now teaches classes about how humans think when they fight. I learned why we call ourselves the Haunted Generation." The reporter turned on her recorder and waited. Vexstar looked at his new drink when it arrived. His 4 hands shook a little as he picked it up. The cantina noise seemed to fade away around them. "Before the war started, we thought humans were weak," Vexstar said. "Our scientists studied them from far away. They had small ships. Their weapons were not as good as ours. They had only been in space for a short time. We thought they would give up as soon as we showed them our power." He took another drink. "The coalition leaders said it would be easy. They said humans were just another primitive species that needed to learn their place in the galaxy. They said we would take their worlds and make them work for us. Simple." The reporter wrote notes quickly, but it was not simple. No. Vexstar's eyes became distant, like he was seeing something far away. "The first time we met human ships in battle, everything changed. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. They did not run away. They did not ask for mercy. They attacked us, like wild animals defending their babies." He paused and looked around the cantina. Other aliens were drinking and talking, but they seemed so far away from his memories. We had better shields, better weapons, better everything. But humans had something we did not understand. They had this fire inside them, this refusal to give up, even when they had no chance to win. "What do you mean?" the reporter asked. "I mean they would ram their broken ships into our healthy ones. I mean they would fight until their last breath. I mean they would smile at us, even when we captured them like they knew something we did not." Vexstar's voice cracked a little. Fought like every battle was the most important thing in the universe." The reporter put down her pen. "Were you afraid of them?" Vexstar was quiet for a long time. Round them, the cantina continued its normal noise, but at their table, everything felt heavy and sad. At first, no. We were bigger, stronger, more advanced. But then I started to understand something terrible. Humans do not just fight with their bodies or their ships. They fight with their hearts, their love for each other. With their hope for the future, he finished his drink in one gulp. "Do you know what it is like to fight someone who will never stop? Someone who will keep coming at you no matter how many times you knock them down. Someone who will turn their own death into a weapon against you." The reporter shook her head. "It changes you," Vexstar continued. "It makes you wake up at night hearing their voices. It makes you wonder if you are the monster in the story. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about war and strength and winning." The veteran stood up slowly. His movements were careful, like someone much older than he looked. "The war ended 3 years ago. We signed peace treaties. We divided up space between us. But for those of us who fought against humans, the war never really ended. It lives in our dreams. It lives in our memories. It lives in the knowledge that we met something in the darkness of space that was stronger than our weapons and our ships." He dropped some coins on the table and looked at the reporter one last time. "You want to write about the war? Then write this. We thought we were fighting primitive creatures. Instead, we found something that scared us more than any monster we had ever imagined. We found beings who would never, ever give up. And once you have seen that kind of determination, you carry it with you forever. Vexstar walked away into the night, leaving the reporter alone with her notes and the terrible understanding of what it means to fight against hope itself. Vexstar's hands shook as he started to tell his story. The reporter could see the pain in his compound eyes. He took a deep breath and began to speak about the day that changed everything for him. Our first big fight with humans happened at a place called Kepler 442, he said slowly. Our spy ships told us there were only 30 human ships there. We had 200 ships. Our commanders laughed and said it would be easy, said we would be home in time for dinner. The reporter wrote down his words carefully. She could tell this was hard for him to remember. Human ships were led by 2 people, Vexstar continued. Admiral Heianwu was in charge of all their ships. Captain Jisoo commanded one of their biggest vessels. We thought they would run away when they saw how many ships we had. We thought they would call for help or try to hide. But they did something we never expected. He stopped talking and stared at his empty glass. The reporter waited patiently for him to continue. They attacked us first, Vexstar said with wonder in his voice. 30 ships against 200 and they attacked us. Not the other way around. They came at us like angry hornets protecting their nest. The reporter looked up from her notes. What made their attack so different? Everything, Vexstar replied. We had studied war for thousands of years. We knew all the rules. We knew how battles should work. But humans did not follow any rules we understood. They fought like nothing we had ever seen before. He raised his hand and ordered another drink. When it came, he took a small sip and continued his story. Captain Jisoo's ship was hit early in the battle. Her ship was losing air, and her engines were damaged. Any normal commander would have surrendered or tried to escape, but not her. She did something that still gives me nightmares. The reporter leaned forward. What did she do? She turned her dying ship into a weapon, Vexstar said quietly. She aimed it directly at our command ship. At the last second, she ordered her crew to get into escape pods. Then she stayed behind to make sure her ship hit its target. The veterans... The voice became even quieter. The impact destroyed our flagship. Our admiral was killed instantly. Communication systems were ruined. In one move, she had cut off the head of our entire fleet. The reporter stopped writing and looked at him. She sacrificed herself. Not just herself. Her ship. Her crew's safety. Everything, just to hurt us. Vexstar shook his head. But that was not the strangest part. The strangest part was how all the human ships worked together without talking to each other. He took another sip of his drink. After Captain Jisoo destroyed our flagship, the other human ships seemed to know exactly what to do. They did not use their radios. They did not send messages. But they moved like they were all parts of one big creature. The reporter frowned. How is that possible? I have wondered about that for years, Vexstar said. Maybe they planned it all before the battle. Maybe they knew each other so well, they could guess what the others would do. Or maybe humans have some kind of connection we do not understand. He looked around the cantina again. Admiral Heianwu moved his ship to take command after our flagship was destroyed, without being told. 3 other human ships formed a protective circle around him. When one of our ships tried to attack him, 2 human ships rammed it from both sides at the same time. The reporter wrote quickly, How did the battle end? We won, but it did not feel like winning, Vexstar said bitterly. We had started with 200 ships. When the fighting stopped, we only had 140 ships left. The humans had started with 30 ships. They lost all 30 ships, but they had hurt us badly. He paused and looked directly at the reporter. But the worst part was not the ships we lost. The worst part was what happened when we captured the human survivors. What happened? They looked at us with such hate and determination, Vexstar said. They were beaten, they were prisoners, their ships were destroyed, but they looked at us like they had won the battle, like they were already planning how to hurt us next time. The veterans stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the lights of Nexus Prime twinkled in the darkness. One human prisoner, a young man named Teho, was brought to our ship. He was injured and outnumbered. But he looked our interrogator right in the eye and said, "You may have won today." but you will never win the war. Vexstar turned back to the reporter. At the time, we thought he was just being brave. We thought he was trying to scare us. But later, we realized he was telling us the truth. That battle at Kepler 442 was our first lesson about humans. We learned that they do not fight just to win. They fight to make sure you pay a price for fighting them. He sat back down at the table. 60 ships lost to defeat 30 human ships. That was the moment we realized this war would not be easy. That was the moment we realized we were not fighting ordinary creatures. We were fighting something that would make us hurt for every victory. The reporter closed her notebook. She could see that remembering this battle was painful for the old veteran. But she also understood that this was just the beginning of his story. After the painful battle at Kepler 442, Vexstar's voice became more hollow and empty. The reporter could see that the next part of his story was even harder for him to tell. He stared at his drink for a long time before speaking again. The coalition leaders were angry about losing so many ships, he said quietly. They wanted to show the humans what happened when you fought against us. They chose a place called Terra Nova Colony to make an example. The reporter waited as Vexstar struggled to find the right words. His forearms moved nervously and his compound eyes looked everywhere except at her. Terra Nova was supposed to be a peaceful place, he continued. Our intelligence reports said it was just farmers, teachers, and shopkeepers. Regular people trying to live quiet lives. The coalition commanders said we would drop bombs from space and destroy their fighting spirit. They said it would be quick and clean. Vexstar's voice cracked as he spoke. We thought we would scare them into giving up. We thought if we showed them how powerful we were, they would surrender without a fight. We were so very wrong. The reporter wrote down his words, but she could see that this memory was causing him real pain. What happened when you arrived at Terra Nova? Everything went wrong from the first day, Vexstar said. We started bombing their cities from space, just like the plan said. But instead of surrendering, the humans did something we never expected. They turned their whole colony into a trap. Took a long drink before continuing. There was a young human named Minho. He was only 20 years old, barely more than a child. But somehow he had organized every person in the colony to fight against us. Farmers became soldiers. Teachers became bomb makers. Children became scouts and messengers. The veteran's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign that he was very upset. When we landed our troops on the planet, we found that every building had been turned into a fortress. The humans had used their farming tools as weapons. They had turned their own homes into death traps. The reporter looked up from her notes. How could civilians fight against trained soldiers? That is what we wondered too, Vexstar replied. But humans are not like other species. They do not separate soldiers from civilians the way we do. When their home is attacked, everyone becomes a fighter. The baker who made bread in the morning would shoot at our soldiers in the afternoon. He paused and looked out the window again. The lights of the city seemed to remind him of the burning buildings on Terra Nova. I remember one building that looked like a school, he said slowly. It seemed safe, so we decided to use it as our command post. The building was empty, or so we thought. We set up our communication equipment and started planning our next attack. The reporter waited as Vexstar gathered his strength to continue. There was a human teacher named Sujin who had worked at that school, he said. She knew we would use her classroom as a command post, so she had filled it with explosives before she left. She had turned her own workplace into a bomb. Vexstar's voice became almost a whisper. 12 of my officers died in that explosion, good soldiers who had families waiting for them at home. They died because a school teacher decided to fight back against us. The reporter put down her pen. Did you find her message? Yes, Vexstar nodded. In the ruins of the classroom, we found a note she had written. It said, "This is for our children's future." That was all. It's just 7 words. But those words told us everything we needed to know about why humans fight. He finished his drink and ordered another one. Sujin was not a soldier. She was a teacher who loved children. But she was willing to destroy her own classroom, her own life's work, to hurt us. She was willing to become a killer to protect the future of children. she would never meet. The reporter asked quietly, "How long did the siege last?" "For months," Vexstar replied. "For months of fighting in every street, every building, every room. The humans never stopped fighting. We destroyed one group of fighters, another group would appear. When we captured one neighborhood, they would attack us from another direction." He looked directly at the reporter. "We had better weapons, better armor, better everything. But the humans had something we could not fight against. They had the determination of people defending their homes. They had the courage of parents, protecting their children." Vexstar's voice grew angry. "Every day more of our soldiers died. Every day we captured more territory, but it cost us more than we could afford. The humans made us pay for every building, every street, every room, with the blood of our troops." The veterans stood up and walked around the table. "We finally took the colony after 4 months of fighting. But when our commanders added up the cost, they were horrified. We had lost thousands of soldiers to defeat a few thousand civilians. Every human who died had taken at least 2 coalition soldiers with them." He sat back down heavily. "That was when the coalition high command started to question whether human worlds were worth conquering at all. We had won the battle, but the victory felt like a defeat. We had learned that there was no such thing as easy victory against humans." The reporter closed her notebook. She could see that telling this story was exhausting for the old veteran. But she also understood that these memories were burned into his mind forever. Vexstar's voice became so quiet that the reporter had to lean very close to hear him. The noise of the cantina seemed to fade away as he prepared to tell the most painful part of his story. His forehands shook worse than before, and she could see tears forming in his compound eyes. "The Battle of the Titan Nebula was the worst day of the war," he whispered. "It was the day we almost won everything. It was also the day we realized we could never truly defeat humans." The reporter put down her pen and just listened. She could tell this memory was the hardest one for him to share. "By this time in the war, we had destroyed most of the human fleet," Vexstar continued. "They had very few ships left. We had gathered our grand armada of 800 vessels to finish them once and for all. The humans had only 50 ships left under the command of Admiral Donghayan." He paused and wiped his eyes with one of his hands. "We thought it would be the final battle. We thought we would crush their last fleet and then attack their homeworld. The odds were impossible for them. 800 ships against 50. Number military commander in the galaxy would fight such a battle." The reporter asked softly, "What made this battle different?" "Admiral Donghayan was different," Vexstar replied. "He was an old human, maybe 60 years old, had fought in every major battle of the war. He had seen his friends die, his ships destroyed, his people suffering, but he never gave up hope." Vexstar took a shaky sip of his drink. "When our Grand Armada arrived at the Titan Nebula, we expected the humans to run away. We expected them to scatter and hide. Instead, they flew directly toward us. 50 ships charging at 800 ships. It was like watching someone jump off a cliff." The veteran's voice grew even quieter. "But Admiral Donghayan was not planning to fight us with weapons. He was planning something that no sane commander would ever consider. He was planning to use the nebula itself as a weapon." The reporter frowned. "How can you use a nebula as a weapon?" "The Titan Nebula was very unstable," Vexstar explained. "It was full of gas and dust and strange energy fields. Our scientists had warned us to be careful when we flew through it. But Admiral Donghayan had studied it for months. He knew that. If you hid it in the right places, you could make it collapse." Vexstar's mandibles clicked rapidly. A nebula collapse is one of the most dangerous things in space. It creates a huge gravitational wave that can destroy everything for light years around. No commander would ever risk it because it would kill his own ships too. The reporter realized what he was saying. Humans were planning to kill themselves. "To hurt you?" "Not just hurt us," Vexstar said. "Destroy us." Admiral Donghayan knew that if he could collapse the nebula, it would destroy most of our Grand Armada. But it would also destroy his own fleet. He was willing to sacrifice 50 ships and thousands of human lives to stop us. The veteran stood up and walked to the window again. "I watched it happen from the bridge of my command ship. Captain Yansu was in charge of a human science vessel. She flew her ship directly into the heart of the nebula. Her job was to plant special devices that would start the collapse. Vexstar's voice broke completely. I heard her final message on our communication systems. She said, "Tell Earth we bought them time." Then her ship disappeared into the nebulas. Center. A few seconds later, the collapse began. The reporter sat in stunned silence as Vexstar continued his story. "The gravitational wave hit us like a giant fist," he said. "Ships that had fought in 100 battles were crushed like toys. Our flagship was torn apart. Our communications were destroyed. In less than 10 minutes, we lost 600 ships." He turned back to face the reporter. "But the humans lost almost everything, too. 47 of their 50 ships were destroyed in the collapse. Only 3 ships escaped with information about our fleet movements. They had sacrificed their entire fleet to hurt us." The veteran sat back down heavily. "Do you understand what that means?" Admiral Dong Hayan looked at impossible odds and decided that dying was better than losing. He chose to kill his own people rather than let us win.
Oh.
The reporter shook her head. "Why would anyone make that choice?" "Because humans do not think like we do," Vexstar replied. "We fight to win, fight to conquer, fight to gain something. But humans fight for something different. They fight to protect what they love. They fight to save their children's future. They fight to make sure their enemies pay a price for victory." He finished his drink and stared at the empty glass.
After
The Titan Nebula, we still had more ships than the humans. We still had better technology. But we had learned something that terrified us. We had learned that humans would rather die than lose. We had learned that victory against them might cost us everything we had. The veteran looked up at the reporter with sad, tired eyes. Captain Yansu could have escaped. She could have saved herself and her crew. But she chose to fly into the nebula's heart to make sure the collapse would work. She chose to die so that 3 human ships could escape with information that would help Earth defend itself. Vexstar's voice became barely a whisper. That is when I realized we were not fighting an enemy. We were fighting an idea. We were fighting the idea that some things are worth dying for. And you cannot kill an idea with weapons. The cantina around them had become very quiet. Other aliens had stopped their own conversations to listen to Vexstar's story. Even the bartender had stopped cleaning glasses and was watching the old veteran with sad eyes. Everyone could feel the weight of his memories. Vexstar finished his last drink and stared at the empty glass for a long time. The reporter waited patiently, knowing that he was gathering his strength to finish his story. This final part seemed to be the hardest for him to tell. "We won every major battle," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Our ships were bigger and stronger. Our weapons were more advanced. Our armies were better trained. By all the rules of war, we should have conquered the humans easily." The reporter watched as tears began to flow down his scarred face. She had never seen an alien cry before, and it made her own eyes water. "But we learned something that changed everything," Vexstar continued. "We learned that humans would never stop fighting. They would never surrender. They would never accept defeat. Even when they were beaten, they would keep fighting. Even when they were dying, they would keep fighting." He stood up slowly, moving like someone much older than his years. The war had aged him in ways that went beyond his physical body. Our soldiers started getting sick from fighting humans. Not sick in their bodies, but sick in their minds. The reporter leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Our doctors called it human syndrome, Vexstar explained. "It was a kind of mental sickness that came from fighting an enemy that would never quit. Our soldiers would capture a human fighter named Taman, and somehow he would escape from our prison ships. Then he would attack our supply lines and rescue other prisoners." The veteran walked around the table, his forearms moving nervously. "We would destroy a human outpost completely. We would think all the humans there were dead. But then the survivors would come back a month later and rebuild their base. They would make it stronger than before. They would attack us again with even more determination." The reporter could see that other aliens in the cantina were listening to every word. Some of them nodded their heads, as if they had their own memories of fighting humans. "The worst part was that our soldiers started to expect it," Vexstar said. "Every time we won a battle, our troops would wait for the humans to surprise us somehow. Every time we captured a human base, our soldiers would be afraid to sleep there because they expected the humans to come back. He paused by the window and looked out at the city lights. I remember one of my officers, a young soldier named Crixville. He was brave in every battle except when we fought humans. He told me that fighting humans was like fighting ghosts. Could kill them, but they would come back to haunt you. The veteran turned back to face the reporter. The war ended 3 years ago when our coalition leaders decided to ask for peace. Not because we could not win, but because we realized that beating humans would destroy us in the process. Every victory against them cost us more than we could afford to lose, the reporter asked quietly. What convinced your leaders to stop fighting? The numbers, Vexstar replied. Every human soldier we killed required 10 coalition soldiers to do it. Every human ship we destroyed cost us 3 of our own ships. Every human world we conquered left us weaker than when we started. He moved back to the table and put his hands on the back of his chair. But it was not just about numbers. It was about what the war was doing to our own people. Our soldiers were having nightmares. They were afraid to fight. They were questioning why we were fighting at all. Vexstar's voice became even quieter. I still hear them in my dreams. Sound of human ships crashing into our big warships. The voices of human soldiers who died protecting their friends. I remember Lieutenant Sun Ho, who held a narrow passage by himself for 6 hours so his unit could save civilians. I remember Captain Hejin, who flew her broken fighter ship into our command carrier. The cantina was completely silent now. Even the background music had stopped. Everyone was listening to the old veteran's final words. That is why they call us the haunted generation, Vexstar said as he began walking toward the exit. We learned that humans do not just fight wars with their weapons and ships. They fight with their entire souls. They fight with their love for their families. They fight with their hope for the future. And once you have seen that kind of determination, you never forget it. The veteran stopped at the door and looked back at the reporter one last time. The galaxy is a big place with many strong species, but now everyone knows about humans. Everyone knows that they are small in number, but terrible in war. Everyone knows that fighting them will cost you more than you can afford to lose. He pushed open the door and stepped out into the night. We thought we were teaching them their place in the galaxy. Instead, they taught us that some things are worth dying for, and that lesson will haunt us forever. The cantina remained silent long after Vexstar disappeared into the darkness. The reporter sat alone with her notes, finally understanding why. The galaxy now treated humanity with such respect and fear. It was not because humans were the strongest or had the best weapons. It was because they had proven that they would never stop fighting for what they believed in. And that simple truth was more powerful than any weapon in the universe.